Let's return now to this visit by the Chinese Premier. Joining me is a Liberal MP, Aaron Violi. Aaron, the language is all there in terms of the leaders' comments saying they're back on the right track in terms of Australia-China relations. Still some sensitivities, including with our colleague Cheng Lei, Sky News colleague Cheng Lei, who, of course, was detained by the Chinese authorities for more than 3 years. She went there today to that news statement and was being blocked. A couple of embassy officials obviously didn't want the cameras to get vision of Lei being in the same room as the Chinese Premier.
Yeah, it's really disappointing. I mean, a free press is so crucial to our democracy here in Australia, and to think that government officials from the embassy, the Chinese embassy, are blocking a journalist is very disappointing. And Cheng Lei's obviously got a unique experience to bring to this, but your job and all journalists is to hold the government of Australia, but also foreign visitors to account. So it's really disappointing to see, and it really highlights that inherent tension that we have with our relationship with China and with the CCP. Obviously, huge economic drivers of this country. In my electorate of Casey and the Yarra Valley, wine is a big part of our industry. We were at the forefront of some of those trade bans, and how we maximise our economic opportunities while never compromising on our democracy and the freedom of journalists, or the freedom of the individual, is one of these tensions that we're always, or not always, but we've got to continue to navigate with Xi Jinping and the CCP.
Yeah, it's a very, very different approach. And apparently the leaders, I wasn't in the room, but Cheng Lei told us that the leaders weren't aware of what was going on, but some of the Australian officials were trying to help get around her to give her some space from what was otherwise a couple of staff members from the embassy blocking her way, or blocking the vision towards her, which is, as you say, an encroachment upon the freedom of the press to be there and to witness what was going on.
And I think a real follow-up to this, Kieran, and I'll give the Prime Minister the benefit of the doubt. We need to see, and let's assume he and the officials and members of Parliament that were there were not aware of this. But this is another example, and the question needs to be asked of the Prime Minister and of Penny Wong, the Foreign Minister. They should raise this issue and this incident with the Chinese officials, and we need to get an answer to this, because we're in Australia and the freedom of the press is fundamental to our country, and any journalist should be able to attend a press conference with visiting dignitaries. Yeah. So hopefully the Prime Minister will raise this and will be able to give yourself, Sky, but all journalists and all of the public an update on this concerning development.
Yeah, it was certainly, that's the right way to put it, at a time when they're trying to say they've reset and moving on and so on, but a very clear point of tension and difference in the way that the different systems operate. But it's a bit unfortunate that it happened in our own Parliament, where there was an attempt to try and block the media. That seems very rich indeed, Aaron.
It does, and it goes to this ongoing tension, and it's very often not what's said in diplomacy, but what's done. And this is, by the Chinese embassy, it appears on face value to be a significant power play, and we see it in other areas, the grey zone activities in the South China Sea. We see it with some of the unfortunate incidents with our military involving the Chinese Coast Guard and the Chinese military. And so we can never cede our sovereignty. We have to stand up as a democratic nation for other democratic nations and those important freedoms. And we've seen, as I said, my community have seen it firsthand. We can't let economic coercion cower us from standing up for our values, and that's why we need to continue as economies, and whether it's locally in my community or across the country, diversify. That's why I know the Coalition and Dan Tehan, as the Trade Minister at the time, signed so many free trade agreements, and strengthening our relationships with countries like India and the Quad and wider economies all through Asia Pacific, and also the UK, Europe. That's so crucial. Diversify away from the Chinese economy, because they've shown it before. They'll use economic coercion when it suits them, and we need to continue to prepare for that moving forward.
Now, on to a couple of other things before you go. The Climate 200 group apparently targeting a few other seats with some teal candidates, including your own, in outer Melbourne. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I saw those reports this morning. My focus since being elected 2 years ago and being pre-selected as the candidate in November 2021 has been on engaging with the community and representing Casey. I'm a proud third-generation local. My family came from Italy in the 1950s and established a farm in Sylvan. We've got strong ties through the agricultural community, which is a big part of Casey, and I've spent my whole life, as my wife has, in the community. So my focus is continuing to make sure that I'm listening, I'm available, I'm representing Casey, fighting for the community. I've done that for the last 2 years. I'll continue to do that while I have the great honour and privilege of serving the people of Casey. We serve at their bequest at an election, and it's democracy. Many people can run. I think I had 11 or 12 candidates ran for Casey at the last election, and that's one of the great parts of Australia. Everyone has the opportunity to run, but ultimately the people of Casey will make their decision, and I've been focused on representing them in the community and also in Canberra.
Yeah, well, I know you're a cricketer, so 11, first 11, as long as you're not the 12th, that's all right. Now, let's talk about the polling today. What did you make of that? Are you buoyed by that, those numbers for Peter Dutton?
Anytime we look at polling, it's a point in time and it's a reference point. You've got to be careful. Again, being around 2 years now, you can't talk up the good polls and then talk down the bad polls. That they give an indication, they give an insight. They're a point in time. I think the positive is what we're seeing is the Australian people have spent 2 years getting to understand Peter Dutton, and clearly the polls are showing that they're liking what they're seeing, and I'm hearing that in my community as well. And what they've also had an opportunity to do is look at the Prime Minister and understand the Prime Minister a lot better. Let's not forget he ran a very small target strategy. Many people didn't know a lot about Anthony Albanese prior to the last election, and we're seeing that people aren't happy with his performance. It was clear he was distracted from the cost of living crisis by the Voice referendum for the first 18 months of his prime ministerial time, and he promised a lot. He promised during the 2022 campaign that he had a plan to solve the cost of living crisis that Australians were in, and well, 2 years later, it's clear that plan's not working, and it's clear the Australian people are losing faith in him and his ability to improve the lives of all Australians. So it is a positive sign, but as I said, it's a point in time, it's a reference point. It marries up with what I'm hearing in my community, but we know there's a lot of work to do, and we need to continue, similar to, as I said before, listening, engaging and making sure we're fighting for the needs of the Australian people and putting forward positive policies going into the next election.
Aaron Violi, thanks very much for that. Appreciate it.